Live look there in Tel Aviv as we are watching the meeting hopefully take place in just a little bit, expected to happen at 6:30 Eastern inside of the White House. Netanyahu has also thanked President Trump and his recent support for Israel during its 12-day war with Iran, calling it a great victory over our common enemy. Let's bring in the conversation right now. Senior fellow at the FDD, Behnam Taleblu. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And we talked about how in sync Netanyahu and Trump have been over the war in Gaza, now also with Iran. How in sync are they? Are they seeing eye to eye as best as they have during this conflict?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you again. And one does really wonder here if Prime Minister Netanyahu is getting frequent flyer miles based on all the meetings he's had back in Washington, and an official Washington, I should say, with the president, both before the press and behind closed doors. No doubt this is a special relationship between Washington and Jerusalem. No doubt there are personal ties that bind between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, but make no mistake as well, I think President Trump understands that both countries, and I repeat, both countries had a military win with respect to the patron of many of the terror groups that the Israelis have been fighting since October 7th. And now I think the U.S. is looking to translate a military win into a potential political win, and that's why all eyes and attention have shifted from Iran to Gaza, at least in the short term, with this potential phased hostage deal that the U.S. is pushing for. No doubt, I think if you had to ask Netanyahu or any other member of his coalition what their political preference would be, it would be to get all the hostages, both deceased and still living, all out at once. Perhaps for that kind of stuff, you might have to put more pressure on Qatar and Turkey, but Qatar was mediating this round, which is, again, noteworthy.
Yeah, that is so very good point. And this is the third visit for Netanyahu in Washington, D.C. at the White House. And of course, Netanyahu has also called for the elimination of Hamas, saying they need to be eliminated. They need to go surrender, disarm, and go into exile. What exactly would that mean, to go into exile?
It could be about top military brass, or one should say what's left of top military or political brass after all the decapitations and military defeats the group has suffered since literally right after October 7th, 2023. Make no mistake, I don't think that is a large volume of people at this point in time, but the debate really is going to rage between Israel, America, and some of the Arab partners in the region as to what kind of political order comes next, even post-ceasefire. So let's say you have the full 60 days, as is reported. What's next? Is there an element of Hamas militants that disband and disarm, that kind of join what's left of society in Gaza? Or, is it a Palestinian Authority, a quote-unquote rehab Palestinian Authority? That's one that I think many Europeans and Arab states in the Persian Gulf are quite keen on, but certainly not Prime Minister Netanyahu and elements of his coalition there. So really all eyes will be on local politics and what local politics, both in Israel and with respect to Hamas in Gaza, will make of this ceasefire agreement. But there's no doubt that this is something the most powerful person in the room wants, and that's President Donald Trump.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Let's turn our attention right now from that potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza to what's going on with Iran. And we talk about what happened with that strike. And it feels like a long time ago that the obliterating strike of those nuclear facilities at Fordow and other locations. We've also heard that the United States and Israel would also be open to another response to Iran if they decided to continue their ambitions with the nuclear. In terms of the negotiations, where do we sit with that? What do they hope to get out of this meeting in terms of Iran?
Well, there certainly is an unconfirmed report that predates, actually, the Prime Minister's trip to Washington that said that potentially the Iranian foreign minister and the U.S. special envoy would be meeting in Oslo at some time this week. Neither side, I repeat, neither side, nor the U.S. nor Iran has confirmed that. So this means that likely what you're going to see between the U.S. and Iran and between Israel and Iran is more kind of public posturing. I think, Trump has a pretty good hand here and a fairly clear shot to be able to articulate to the Iranians, whether he does so privately via communique or publicly via Twitter or X or Truth Social, that the Iranians have really no way out but through here. And if they seek to reconstitute and rebuild, which is almost certainly what Iran's defiant revolutionary leadership is going to do, then there may be yet another pale green light for the Israelis to go after what's left of Iran's atomic infrastructure. And I think compared to many other presidents who have said all options on the table, really for a little over 2.5 decades now, I think we've seen in really the first 6 months of the Trump administration administration, all options have been on the table with respect to Iran: diplomacy, sanctions, and even military pressure.
And I want to ask you, because President Trump, despite those attacks that he approved of, he talks about being a peacemaker and bringing peace, as Netanyahu also said, to expand the circle of peace to that region in the Middle East. Do you think that could be a point of disagreement between Trump and Netanyahu? Because we've seen Netanyahu talk about the elimination of Hamas, also Iran. Do you think that could be a point of tension between the two?
Well, there's no doubt that style has a substance of its own, particularly when it comes to the way the president is looking to kind of capitalize on military wins and lock them in with political deals in the Middle East. I certainly think there may be some bumps in the road, particularly short term, with what happens with Hamas and the hostages in Gaza. But I think, make no mistake, what both leaders have shown, particularly almost you could say with the faking out or the deception of talks and the 60-day window earlier this year, both leaders absolutely mean business, and both leaders absolutely are singing from the same sheet of music about doing whatever it takes to prevent a nuclear-armed Islamic Republic of Iran. So in the big picture, no, I don't see much gray space.
All right, very good. BBT, I appreciate your time. Anything else that you'd like to add? Because there's so many complex characters in this region. Anything else that you're looking to for the next few weeks?
I would just say to make sure to keep your eyes on what's happening on the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, particularly the Red Sea. The Houthis, the Iran-backed rebels in Yemen, have resumed both ballistic missile attacks against Israel and have tried to put their foot over the line when it comes to the U.S. Ceasefire there by targeting actually a civilian merchant vessel going through the Gulf of Aden, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and of course the Red Sea. So keep your eyes on what's happening with respect to the Houthis, which are Iran's most powerful proxy, even while there is a ceasefire between Iran and Israel directly.
Yeah, that is a good point. No matter if that ceasefire comes to be, we'll see if it holds, and we'll see if some of the proxies also play ball in terms of that. All right. Thanks again. I appreciate your time here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you.